without further ado, I'm just going to introduce Professor Carol Atkinson from Manchester Met University. Carol is a Professor of HRM in Decent Work and Productivity. She's leading the Adult Social Care Learning Lab within the Good Employment Learning Lab. And Carol's been researching these issues for over a decade, working with policymakers such as Skills for Care, the Welsh Government and Greater Manchester Combined Authority. So without further ado, I'll pass over to Carol. Carol.
Many thanks, Richard. Thanks for the introduction, and we're delighted to be here. So there's a team of us here. I'm going to make a few opening remarks and I'll introduce the team as we go. But as Richard said, we are from Manchester Met, the Centre for Decent Work and Productivity, and we are running an ESRC funded project called the Good Employment Learning Lab. I'm going to spend a few minutes talking a little bit about the lab before going into values-based recruitment, because I'm hoping that you'll be interested in the lab generally, not just this bit of it that we're talking about today, but some of the other things that we're going to do as well. So it's going to be in great government fashion, I'm afraid, that I have to say things like next slide. So you'll have to bear with us. But Jenny, could you go on to the next slide, please? So this is an overview of what we're doing in the project, or at least the parts that we're talking about today. And one of the things that we're interested in is how we create good employment. That's central to our work and to the interests of the ESRC. And we're doing that in two ways in the project. We're looking at a sector-based approach and a place-based approach. The place-based approach looks at Greater Manchester, and I'm not going to talk about that particularly today. The sector-based approach is looking at adult social care. And when we bid for the funding, the ESRC were really interested in thinking about investigating good employment and how we create good employment in adult social care for a whole range of reasons that I'm sure you're familiar with. And our particular focus in this project is about how you improve employment quality through raising line manager skills. So I imagine we have quite a few HR people or people who are familiar with HR theory and practice in the session. And you'll be familiar with this idea that good HR practice is as good or not as the people implementing it. And the people implementing it are line managers. And how do we help them to think about or work with people in a way that creates good employment? So part of the project that I'm not going to talk about today, but you may be interested in, and if you are, I hope you can see the link at the bottom. It's kind of slightly off the bottom of my slide, but we'll circulate the slides anyway. Part of that is to think about how to deliver that development, and we're doing that in a range of ways that I'll talk about in a moment. But our focus more today is around raising line manager skills to work with values-based recruitment. So could I have the next slide, Jenny? So this is what we're doing in the project itself. So we're currently on what we've called our first management challenge. We split that into two. The Greater Manchester Lab is looking at managing a secure and agile workforce, and the Adult Social Care Lab is looking at recruiting, and in particular, values-based recruitment. I'm going to say some more about that in a few minutes. And what we're doing is delivering a range of interventions. As I said already, that will be subject to research and evaluation about which of those interventions make a difference, which might be more effective. So we've run masterclasses. We've run 6 altogether because we're working with 3 partners. We're working with Manchester City Council, Thameside Borough Council, and I always get this wrong, Chester and West Cheshire Council. So we've got those three councils, those 3 partners in the lab that are our primary members, but we open up our training interventions quite widely in Greater Manchester. So if you are in that geographical location and interested in being involved in our project, again, have a look at that link or contact one of us and we'll be happy to give you more information. As well as the masterclasses, we've run peer learning. That's quite similar to action learning, but a bit more structured. So action learning is very open. The delegates define their own issues. Whereas in peer learning, we're working in groups, particularly between 3 and 6. We're aiming for 6, but we're not always getting the numbers that we need. We're groups of 3 and 6 to work together on their issues. Again, thinking about values-based recruitment and some of the issues participants are dealing with. And then we're doing in-business coaching. I'm going to introduce the team to you in a little bit, but our project fellows go into, it's all online at the moment, but go into, or at least online, go into a range of organisations and work one-to-one with managers to help them think about their recruitment challenges and how values-based recruitment can support them in those challenges. So across the project, there's going to be several hundred managers that we engage with adult social care, and in this particular challenge, we're probably engaging or hoping to engage with around 100, possibly slightly less. So it's a big project, as Richard said. We're in the middle of it, and we're just coming to the end of our first set of masterclasses on values-based recruitment, and we're in the middle of some of our peer learning and coaching activity around that with our 3 partners. And our team is going to talk to you more about the detail of that as we go through the session. So Jenny, could I have the next slide, please? So why did we choose values-based recruitment? Well, we know, anybody who's worked in the sector for any length of time, that there is a widely acknowledged recruitment and retention crisis in adult social care. Now, we are obviously aware that values-based recruitment won't solve all those problems, but we felt that it was one of those interventions that might make a difference. And if we could work with managers to help them work effectively with values-based recruitment, that would be a good starting point. So again, just to make sure that we're all thinking about the same things, values-based recruitment is an approach that attracts and recruits employees on the basis that their individual values and behaviours align with the values of the organisation. So as well as skills, experience, knowledge, those things that we typically look for in a recruitment process, we're interested in an individual's values. It's been widely used in healthcare since 2014 and is used also in other sectors. Now, healthcare has defined what those values might be. Many other sectors and organisations also do that. Healthcare looks at the 6 C's, and I haven't committed them to memory, but care, compassion, competence, commitment, those kinds of values are the things that are looked for in healthcare. And there's a body of evidence, it's not a huge body of evidence, that suggests that it makes a difference in healthcare if you recruit people for those values that the health sector widely recognises. People's fit, people's sense of well-being, motivation, satisfaction improves, and there are some positive outcomes. So following that, Skills for Care, that's part of the policy network or infrastructure within adult social care, has widely promoted a values, oh, it's gone too far, yep, sorry, widely promoted a values-based approach to recruitment. Because much adult social care is delivered in the private and independent and voluntary sector, there isn't a sector-wide take on what those values should be. So some of the work that we've done that we'll talk about more later is about how you start establishing those values. So what are the organisation's values, and how do we look for those in individuals? So we were interested in that. We were interested in it particularly because it's a very different context to healthcare. Healthcare tends to be delivered in larger organisations that have often professional HR structures, that have the resources to run things like assessment centres that are recommended for trying to establish what values are and see how good those matches in values are. And yet we were aware in social care that's often very different. You're not working with very well qualified professionals in those contexts. You're often working with less well qualified people. You're often working in smaller organisations with less resource and less HR support. So how would that transfer into adult social care? How would managers deal with those issues, and how could our development and training interventions support them with that? So, as I say, Skills for Care has been very much an advocate of values-based recruitment. it involves establishing strong workplace values and ensuring that your workforce matches them. Doing that will help to reduce time and wasted resources in recruiting the wrong people. So quite a strong advocacy of values-based recruitment. And it's interesting, in a report that Skills for Care did last year, was that their sense, or their finding from a group of 300 providers that they telephone interviewed, was that actually there was quite a high take-up of values-based recruitment, although they did recognise there might be some over-reporting in that because the questions were quite simple. But what was less clear from that survey was the benefits of that. So around a third did say they thought they'd helped them. It had helped them with retention, but actually the benefits that we've seen elsewhere weren't as widely reported. So although what we are seeking to do is to deliver training to help managers work more effectively with values-based recruitment, in our research and evaluation, we're also trying to establish what difference it makes. Has it helped recruit people more effectively? Has it helped retain them? And those are some of the questions that we're at the very early stages of, but we'll reflect on in the later stages of the presentation. So our challenge is working with managers to develop these skills and to explore its impact. And clearly one of our aims is to improve employment quality and to help address this recruitment and retention crisis. So a grand aim, if you like, but a very worthy one, we think, and we'll share our progress with you. So Jenny, can we have the next slide? Thank you. So what we're going to do in this session, so I'm going to run through it, introducing the project team as I go, and they'll introduce themselves at the start of each section. So in a moment, we're going to do a quick poll first. But after that, Sarah Acton and Liz Rivers, who are our project fellows, are going to reflect on participant experiences of values-based recruitment. And Liz and Sarah, though I'm sure they'll introduce themselves more fully, have lots of experience in delivering training and development interventions and have been doing the delivery of the masterclasses, the peer learning and the coaching. So they've got some fascinating insights to share with us. They're also going to do a sort of a discursive, interactive discussion with one of our participants, Andrea Phillips, who's been on our masterclass or other interventions and worked in adult social care, and is going to reflect on her experiences. So I hope you'll find that really interesting. I think that will prove to be fascinating. And then Katie Willocks, who is our research associate and leading our evaluation, is going to share with you some of our learning so far and our early evaluation findings. And I'm going to leave lots of time at the end for discussion and questions and answers, because we think that's where quite a lot of our richness will come from. The other person I need to introduce is Jenny Shawley, who's our project manager, who's operating our slides. And in a moment is going to, well, Jenny, do you want to share the poll now? So we're going to ask you a question. And the question is driven by the work that I've just referred to from Skills for Care, that says, while they think there's been a good uptake of values-based recruitment, the outcomes, the benefits of that have perhaps not been as widely reported as we might have expected. So Jenny, I'm going to leave you to explain the Mentimeter process, but the question essentially is, how effective do you think values-based recruitment is at the moment in adult social care?
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Yes, as Carol said, we've got a very simple question and we've already got some answers to it, which is rather fantastic. So we have a link there in chat. If you'd rather go to menti.com and use the code at the top of the screen, that's also fine. That's 67208360. So interestingly, we've got some opposing views. I really like watching it move. I feel like Jon Snow on election night. So we've got some changing opinions, I think, coming through. So yeah, if people are happy to answer that, and we'll kind of come back to this in a later poll, not exactly this question, but a little bit more about the key issues as well. So I don't know if Carol, if these are the kind of responses we were expecting.
Well, I was interested to see, really, as I say, I think that probably is more or less, we've got a fair split, haven't we, with more on moderately or not very. So I guess that's good for us in a way, because that shows us a need for what we're doing. But it's also good to see that in some areas, at least, it is working effectively. So that's really helpful. Thank you. We'll come back and ask you your views later. But for now, I'm going to hand over to Sarah and Liz, who are going to share some reflections on our delivery of interventions and what our learning on that side of the project is so far.
Thanks very much. So I'm Sarah Acton. I'm one of the project fellows at the Good Employment Learning Lab. And before I joined Manchester Met in January, I was working in a range of HR roles across the kind of public, private and not-for-profit sector. So I've got some kind of really interesting experience around recruitment, and it's been fascinating working with our participants, and particularly in the adult social care sector, kind of learning more about their challenges and hearing some of the challenges that they've been up against. So I'm going to chat you through our intervention design. And when we designed the interventions, we built them around our management learning pillars. So we're really keen to kind of use evidence to build a really effective intervention design. And by the end of the sessions, whether they were the masterclasses, the peer learning or the coaching, we wanted our participants to be able to acquire new skills and knowledge, to reflect on their context and practice, to share and learn with others, and to experiment in a safe space. And Carol's chatted you through the different types of interventions. People were able to sign up for just one intervention, a couple, or all three. So we're really interested in the cumulative effect of that learning as well. So starting off with the masterclasses, they were deliberately designed to be interactive. So not the kind of webinars that you can turn up for and kind of sit and, you know, eat your lunch while you're doing them. We really wanted people to participate and get involved. So we created lots of opportunities to interact, to collaborate, to share ideas with the other participants. And we kicked off each session by asking participants to score their confidence levels with values-based recruitment on a scale of 1 to 5 to really help them think about why they were there and what they wanted to get out of the session. We then moved into a group discussion of existing recruitment challenges to help participants hear from other people, to share their ideas, and to again further focus their minds on what they wanted to get from the session and which areas they wanted to address. We moved into a kind of taught section where we offered some CIPD definitions of recruitment, and this was really helpful because we attracted people at varying levels of their career. So some people really new to line management and to recruitment, other people who were really quite experienced. So it gave us a level playing field for people's understanding of recruitment. And then we looked at Skills for Care's 5-stage model of values-based recruitment, which is on the screen there. And I won't go into now, but they've got some excellent resources on their website. And that was really useful to help the participants to break down the recruitment process, looking at it right from, you know, how do we even design and attract these people, design the roles and attract people in, right through to the induction stage. So not just looking at it from the interview perspective. And that gave participants an opportunity to reflect on areas where they were really good and areas for development, and again helping them to focus their attention on what they might do differently. We asked the participants to develop a list of pros and cons of values-based recruitment, and that was a really lovely interactive activity that we did online. The purpose of that was to get them to critically analyse whether values-based recruitment is right for their organisation, so that they could reflect on some of the enabling factors that they might have, such as well-embedded values and senior buy-in, because of course without these they'll have limited success. We gave some practical examples of values-based recruitment in use, and then we moved on to a fictional case study in breakout rooms. And this element was always really popular because participants enjoyed meeting people from other organisations, and it gave them an opportunity to consolidate the knowledge that they'd developed through the session. And then at the end of the session, we built in some quiet reflection space because we were really conscious that we're working with extremely busy managers who don't often get headspace in their working day. So we gave them 5 to 10 minutes to reflect on their current context and what steps they could take to introduce or improve values-based recruitment in their organisations. And we finished off by asking them to share those goals with each other, hopefully to inspire each other, and also to, of course, set themselves a timeline by which they would complete the goals, so getting a SMART target at the end of it. So that's the masterclasses. If we look at peer learning and coaching, as Carol described, they're designed to be much more participant-led, where people arrive with the challenges that they're working through or the opportunities that they're working through. So very little teaching from myself and Liz, although of course we'll always step in with advice where we need to. Peer learning based on action learning set methodology gave managers an opportunity to discuss their challenges with other managers from different organisations in a safe and confidential space. And they were able to learn from each other and created a really nice social aspect to the learning. And then skills coaching is, again, a one-to-one confidential space for participants to work through their challenges, to develop their goals and action plans. And what was really interesting was with both the skills coaching and the peer learning, we saw kind of confidential and sensitive issues emerging. So that meant that sometimes we crept off the strict topic of values-based recruitment, but it was really important for participants to share openly and honestly the enabling factors and the constraining factors that they were working within. So, you know, the support that they had from their senior leadership team, how well the values were embedded in their organisations, to really get to the heart of what they were working with. And with both peer learning and coaching, the participants were able to revisit those challenges at each session, or they could bring a new challenge to each session. It was up to them, but it gave them a sense of ownership, a sense of momentum and accountability. And it's been really lovely actually to work with lots of participants and see their progress across the sessions. So I'm now going to hand over to Liz, who will share some of the reflections and issues around recruitment that our participants have raised during the sessions. And Jenny, if we could have the next slide, please.
Thanks, Sarah. So hi, everyone. My name's Liz Rivers, and along with Sarah, I'm one of the project fellows at the Good Employment Learning Lab. Prior to joining, I worked as a senior lecturer in HRM, and before that, I worked in the retail sector in HR roles in policy, practice, and learning and development. So what I'm going to share with you in this slide are the reflections that participants raised with us on values-based recruitment and the issues that they articulated. And these are either from the masterclasses, in the peer learning groups, or in the one-to-one coaching. And I've sort of loosely grouped these actually. And so on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see sort of more general issues relating to recruitment. So even before we get into the detail of what values-based recruitment is and some of the issues, we couldn't avoid the issues linking to recruitment in the sector just generally. So things that we've been talking about already that Carol referred to, like, for example, the retention challenges. So participants were using words and describing that as things like a conveyor belt or the turnstile effect linked to retention. The insufficient volume and lack of experience from applicants and potentially losing good candidates because of the nature of the work in terms of the shift patterns. And then when we started to talk and hear from our participants about the issues with values-based recruitment, a number of themes came through. So as Sarah said, one of the first activities that we asked people to do in the masterclass was to score themselves against a criteria of their understanding of 1 being low and 4 being high of what values-based recruitment is. And we noticed that people tended to score themselves quite low. And as we explained what values-based recruitment is, people sort of thought they maybe underestimated themselves because they recognised their organisation did already have organisational values, but what they hadn't done is made the connection to link them to part of the interview and recruitment process more broadly. So that's why you can see in the bubbles on the slide in terms of the themes, things like values-based recruitment being just a small part of the interview process. So for example, they might recognise that it's maybe 1 or 2 questions on values rather than being fully embedded. When we shared with participants what the 5 stages of values-based recruitment is, and Sarah had them on the last slide, there's 5 stages that Skills for Care talk about, from articulate to assimilate. And what the issue was that participants maybe had the values-based recruitment in 1 small part, the sort of the main recruitment and attract stage, and not from, for example, embedding values into things like induction or articulating when they preview the work what values they're looking for. Other things that came out in terms of issues, and a big one as well, was linked to line manager training. So the line managers felt they hadn't been trained in many recruitment practices per se, and where they had been, they really learnt on the job and maybe developed some poor practice potentially. So there was a little low understanding generally of values-based recruitment. And another theme that I've just captured in the top 2 bullet points there at the top, the top two bubbles, were about agency workers, which came out quite strongly. So I think a couple of candidates just sort of described agency workers as free spirits. So maybe people that don't in the organisation that don't have the same organisational values, or the process to recruit agency workers is different. So often that values-based recruitment was used for other staff, but not for agency workers. So this was an issue. So I guess in summary, how well did we see that values-based recruitment was embedded in the sector? I mean, I think there's a very positive take from the participants that it could help them with their recruitment challenges like retention. And for them, it was about thinking about, so how could they take this forward, given these were the issues? So Jenny, if we could just move on to the next slide, please. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things that our participants took away to experiment with. So these are some examples as a result of attending one of the sessions of the types of things people are going to go and take away and try and put into practice. So things like going back to revisit their organisational values and maybe a recent interview experience to think and evaluate how well the values are connected in. Things like reviewing their existing interview questions to look about and agree what they're looking for in terms of behaviours that connect with the organisational values. Things about aligning the values end to end, so introducing values into probation review meetings or into supervision. As it said earlier, to communicate the values to candidates at the attract stage, so when they're advertising roles. And then other points were linked to either shadowing colleagues or getting new managers to be involved in interviews where values-based recruitment is being used. And at a broader level, and this was particularly interesting where we had participants who came from the same organisation, and Andrea, I know, is one of those who Sarah's going to talk to in a second, where there were a number of participants from the same organisation. They maybe made connections about how they could come together to take values-based recruitment into their organisation by maybe following up by discussing at a team meeting with their peers or with HR in their organisations where there's a larger organisation. So I'm going to hand over and think we're going to take the slides down now. So just hear from this in practice, and Sarah and Andrea are going to sort of share some of their experiences.
Thanks, Liz. Andrea, how are you there in the audience?
Hi, yeah, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes, lovely. You've not made it onto my front screen yet, but I'll just look at myself, that's fine. So Andrea, thank you so much for joining us today. So you came along to one of our masterclasses and to our peer learning sets. Do you want to introduce yourself first, your role in your organisation, just to give the audience a bit of context?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Andrea Phillips and I'm a team manager for local authority, and I manage a team called the Better at Home team. The Better at Home team it's a hospital discharge service, and we were acute facing, based up at the acute site, and then of course when the pandemic hit and we were following government hospital discharge guidance and coronavirus legislation, we removed ourselves from the acute setting, aligned ourselves in a community with the community, and we had to do a lot of work around changing our delivery model, which really challenged us in terms of the team and the values, etc. So we've been doing that. I've been managing, in fact I was a social worker in the team, and then an advanced practitioner, and then a manager, so I feel like I've cut my teeth and grown up in the team as well.
Thank you. That's really helpful context, I think, to give to the audience. So in terms of what brought you to kind of get involved in the masterclasses and peer learning for values-based recruitment, what was it that attracted you?
I think I was very curious about it. I recognised that, in particular in my team and service area, there was massive challenges to recruitment and retention. And I hadn't really appreciated how much I already was aware of values, behaviours and principles. Like you say, I hadn't joined the dots with the organisation. And when I saw it as an opportunity to learn more about it and to, help the organisation, help the team, help myself in some respects as well. So I saw it as a fantastic opportunity to just learn and grow.
Brilliant, thank you. And then in terms of the challenges that you're experiencing in recruitment in your team, why was it that you thought that what were they, sorry, and why did you think that values-based recruitment could help?
So I don't know what people's perception of hospital discharge is, but I do think there's a perception out there around the nature of the work that we do. And so in order to ensure that people were applying for the right job for them, and we were retaining the, you know, selecting even at the selection process, that we were appealing to the right people, giving the right message and right impression of the service, right through to every stage, to recruitment, to induction and to retention. And value, you know, given the nature of the work that we do when we're working with very vulnerable adults, families and communities, it's absolutely crucial that we do get people with the right values, attitudes and behaviours to deliver good quality social care, which, as we know, is forever growing in complexity and demand and pressure and skill mix, etc. So, you know, it was really crucial that we had a good mix of you know, in terms of every step of the recruitment process, that we were giving people a fair chance to get into an interview, but we were getting the right people to interview as well, because it's very labour intensive for everybody, right from applying for a job to, on the other side, the management in terms of shortlisting and setting interviews and questions, and then all the work that everybody has to do. It's a huge effort, so we want to get it right as much as possible.
Absolutely, and some of the feedback that we've had from kind of other participants is exactly as you've described. And of course, you're only recruiting at a time when you've already got a void in your team somehow, whether it's somebody's left or there's somebody off sick, or, you know, so you're already extremely busy, and then to go through this really labour intensive process, it's stressful, and it's, you know, it kind of takes you away from the work that you want to be doing. So yeah, thank you for that. So in terms of values themselves and how they're embedded in your organisation, how would you say they're embedded? Do people know what they are? Do kind of people live by them?
Yeah, so the organisation itself has a set of values and behaviours, and you know, we do embed them in the team, or we're always striving to embed them in the team, and we reflect upon that in supervision and through you know, CPD developing people's professional development. We always try to, we help people identify an evidence and evidence learning and development as well. But I think sometimes, I think myself as a manager, I've realised, on the one hand, we know they're there, but it's making sure they're to the forefront, and that we can evidence-base them if we need to. So not only we demonstrate them on a day-to-day basis, but that we can also demonstrate how we can evidence that through the work that we do to management. And, you know, so, you know, as a part of this process, I've got a work plan that I'm working towards, so I can show to management in a work plan how we're developing and embedding values-based work, etc.
And it's so important, isn't it, when you're looking at values-based recruitment, that, you know, kind of referring back to the skills for care model, it's not just about the interview process itself, but it's when that person lands in the team that they're being inducted in that way, that they're being held to account to those values, so it doesn't feel like a disconnected process, that actually, you know, the people that you've recruited for those values are then seeing how important they are in their day-to-day jobs. And it sounds like you've got some really good practice going on in your team. So in terms of values-based recruitment, what kind of things have you been experimenting with since you came to the masterclass and the peer learning?
I'm pleased to say quite a lot, really, given that it wasn't that long ago and a lot's happened in a short space of time. Personally, you know, right from looking at the job advert, you know, I've had a look at the job advert, so how we're selling the service. I've changed that. The interview style as well. I feel I've moved away from what I might call a traditional interview, whereby we're just really trying to extrapolate people's knowledge, skills and experience, which I thought often, you know, orphaned people's values. And I had to really challenge myself, you know, in terms of looking for the evidence of that and how we give people an opportunity to describe that to us. I think I was missing a trick there, and, you know, perhaps underplaying people's other experience. You know, people come to us with lived experience, don't they, as well as professional knowledge, skills and so on. So I really challenged myself to how to draw that out of somebody. And I think, to be fair to me, I think I perhaps modelled interviews on my own experience in an interview scenario, but through this process learned that there's other ways of interviewing and extrapolating this information. So genuinely meaning it, if you're asking people for lived experience, or how can they demonstrate a caring, you know, how do you ask somebody, how do you care for the people that you're going to be working with, and the families and the and so on. So it was changing that and getting away from that traditional just asking what's your knowledge and skills experience around, for example, legislation, and how do you implement legislation, and what skills have you got around assessments, how to really challenge myself, how do I bring out that caring, empathetic element to an individual. So looking at perhaps more maybe not as easily quantifiable questions, and maybe more subjective questions. So change, and there's still work to be done on that, because I'm still asking questions, but I'd like to also try and introduce other methods of interviewing people. So that could be a little bit of a case study, or I'm still working out how to break up the question and answer scenario, because I think as well, somebody once said to me, if you're going for an interview, enjoy it, enjoy the experience, because it's a two-way process. And I think I'd lost sight of that and felt it was very much a one-way process, but I now reappreciate it is a two-way process, because not only do we want the right candidate to come and work with us and share our values, we want the person to want to come and work with us and want to bring what they bring into the team, and we learn from them as well. So that's something else I've done. And I've worked with the team in terms of peer-led sessions and the management team to look at different peer-led sessions with qualified, non-qualified, to try and bridge a few gaps in terms of respecting each other's roles and responsibilities. So we've drawn up a values-based agreement, or a contract, whatever you want to call it, and we've done a lot of work around that, because I think at times the social workers and the what we call social care officers who aren't qualified felt there was a disparity between how they felt respected and valued in a team. So we've done some work around that, where we've actually got some common themes, and I think what we realized was people were striving for the same thing. So to do that learning values agreement was actually an effective piece of work, and from that we've started to develop a work plan. It's only small at the minute, but how to actually bring that as well to the fore. So we've got a little work plan where people have got ownership and individual responsibilities that they didn't have before, and that's where I'm at the moment. So still a lot of work to do, but I think for me personally, I can see measurably I've come a long way from joining the learning lab and the masterclass to where I am now.
Definitely, and it was only 2 months ago since you kind of came on the first session, so I think what you've achieved in that time is incredible. And I think that the way that you've kind of really analysed what's working, what's not, what can I experiment with, what can I try out, and I know that you've had kind of the odd question that you've asked where you thought, well, that didn't really elicit the response that I was after, so try again, do something different. And I think your creativity and resilience with all of this has been really, really lovely to watch. Actually, it's been which is obviously why we invited you here to talk about it. So just to kind of round off then, how do you think this might help you and your team with your recruitment challenges in the future?
I think, like you say, it still is a learning process for me, and I think one size doesn't fit all, and I think that's the thing, to truly understand one size doesn't fit all, and mix it up a little bit to ensure that we're giving everybody an equal opportunity to demonstrate and just to showcase their own values and abilities, etc. So I think, yeah, it still is a little bit at the drawing board, and making sure that we are mixing it up a little bit, and it is an ongoing process. But hopefully, as an end result, I'm hoping essentially that we will attract a little bit more in terms of interest in terms of the job application, and that the actual interview experience will perhaps feel less like a test and more of a two-way process that's more enjoyable to people. I'm not saying people definitely felt like that, but that's how when I've reflected on it, that's how I would view it, is if I was the candidate going for an interview in my team. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. That was fantastic. Thank you so much, and thank you for coming to the session today. I hope you'll be able to stick around in case there's any questions at the Q&A at the end. And now I'm going to hand over to Katie Willocks, who's in our evaluation. Well, she's responsible for our evaluation.
Thank you, Sarah. Hi, yeah, I'm Katie. So my role in the project is to run the evaluation and the research associate on the project. And prior to working with this team, I was a senior lecturer in leadership. So this is a very, very different role. It's very much focused on research and data collection. Throughout the GEL project, in addition to running the training interventions, we are evaluating the effectiveness of the training that we're running. So we have a series of data collection methods in place. We're still in the early stages of that, with it being Management Challenge 1. But I'm going to talk a little bit about what kinds of data we're collecting and also talk through some of our emerging findings. And Andrea obviously is one of our participants. I've got some questions for Andrea to give you a feel for the kinds of things that we're actually asking our participants, and to give you a sense of the sorts of things that people are saying about the training that we've been delivering. So I'll start off by talking a bit about the data that we're collecting. So we're using a mixed methods approach for our evaluation and research, which essentially means we're bringing together a range of different data collection tools. So we have designed an online survey, and that's being distributed to everybody who comes along to our workplace trials or our interventions. So after the sessions, if they participate in a masterclass, we send them a survey link, and in there we have a range of questions which help us to find out how they found the masterclass, what kinds of new knowledge they have has been generated for them, and if they've gone on and experimented with anything different in practice. So we started off by using a portfolio design, and we are still using that with some of our participants, but for those who just do the masterclass, there's a survey that we're using. We're also carrying out a series of interviews with our managers who are participating in the interventions. They're semi-structured interviews, and we're going to, through those interviews, we're chatting to them again about their experiences of being part of the training, what they've learned, what they've then gone on and experimented with. And if they see that there's been any impact or change in wider organisational practice as a result of them changing their own practice. So we're doing a series of interviews throughout the project with all managers. We're also carrying out a range of non-participant and participant observation. So myself as a researcher and also our project fellow Sarah and Liz, we're observing the peer learning sessions and the masterclasses, and we're collecting data through participant observation to again give us a sense of how those sessions are working and what kinds of things people are doing differently as a result of those sessions. And also our facilitators, Sarah and Liz, are doing their own reflections on how they feel different interventions have been working. So for example, after delivering a coaching session, Sarah and Liz will sit down, they'll think about how they felt that coaching session went, what they felt the participant got out of that session. And anything they feel needs to be tweaked in terms of their style or delivery of the coaching going forward. So we've got a range of different data collection methods, which is giving us really rich data and helping us to get a real sense of what's working in terms of our delivery of those training interventions. So next slide, please, Jenny. So management learning pillars. Sarah alluded to these management learning pillars in her session. In all of our training, we have embedded these learning pillars, and we're really keen to find, when we're doing our evaluation, we're really keen to get a sense of how well these learning pillars are working. So we're really interested in what opportunities our training generated for people to reflect on their own practice. We really want people to think about what they're doing in their practice and what they want to do differently going forward. So those opportunities for individual personal reflection, but also collective reflection and reflection with others. We're really interested in generating opportunities in our training for people to work with each other, to learn from working with like-minded individuals. So in our evaluation, we want to find out how well that worked for them as a learning strategy and what they learned from working with peers. And and also learning through doing, so experimenting in practice. So Sarah's alluded to this in her section, where our participants have gone away, they've had an idea, they've experimented in practice, and then they've tweaked that idea, they've reflected on it, and it's only through actually having a go at doing something that they've really learned what works for them. So those are our management pillars that are embedded in our design, but we're also wanting to find out how well those have worked as learning strategies for our participants. And therefore, in our evaluation, we're very keen to ask our participants about these 3 management pillars. Next slide, please, Jenny. Right, so just going to briefly pause the slides here because I have some questions that I'd like to ask Andrea about her participation in the project. So hello again, Andrea.
Hiya.
Hi. So this part of the presentation is more about Andrea's experiences of being part of the peer learning and the masterclasses as learning techniques or learning strategies. So Andrea, I was wondering if you might be able to start off by just telling me a little bit about how you found the masterclass and the peer learning as a training technique or as a training intervention.
Yeah, it was good in a sense that you did put a lot of the ownership back on us. So you're right, it was very participatory. We couldn't come in and just listen, and it was good because we kind of tasked each other. We tasked each other and had very thought-provoking questions for each other, and there was a lot of focus on us, like you said, bringing our own issues and challenges and using our peers as a means of exploring and trying to find solutions and moving forward. So that was really good because you're right, there wasn't a lot of people in the peer sessions, but I thought that was really a positive thing, not a negative thing, because I think if the group had been wider and bigger, it might have been more difficult to have genuinely got your issues and you gave us time. We had the time to explore, because some of these solutions are big solutions, aren't they? They're quite long-standing and so on, and it did take a bit of time. So I like that approach. I thought it was really good.
Okay, brilliant. So you mentioned there about having the time to think through some of these issues. What else was it in the masterclass and the peer learning that really helped you to initiate some of the changes that you went on to do in practice?
I think it was just setting the tasks for yourself, so you were very clear about what you were coming in with, what you were being tasked to think about and problem solve, and what you were coming back with, because you're right, we did have the portfolio to update, and what was useful was updating that as you went along as opposed to an end event after the fact.
Brilliant. And can you tell me a little bit about how you found working with others in those group sessions and what it was about the peer support you got and also the support from the facilitators that helped you to think through the ideas that you went on to then implement in practice? Yeah,
so I think it was the people's other shared experiences. Sometimes you fail to appreciate what other people might have similar challenge or different challenges, but similar issues. That didn't make sense, sorry. And it was just really people asked some really good questions. Well, I wouldn't have thought of that, or why are you asking me that? But really making you think, and not getting away with not really thinking about things. But I think some of the solutions that the facilitators or the questions that you were chucking at us were really quite helpful in terms of shaping where we were going with things. Excellent. And it was a safe group as well. I like I say, I think the size of the group really helped facilitate that.
Brilliant. Do you feel that the group dynamics helped you to have confidence in the ideas that you then went on to experiment with?
I do, yeah. They were so embracing, there was no judgment or anybody sort of patronising or haven't you thought of there was none of that. It was just done in a spirit of genuine peer support, peer guidance, and peer-to-peer challenging each other in a very, I suppose, constructive and, yeah, I'm going to use the word support, very supportive way. Excellent. Yeah, it was I just found the whole thing a very positive experience.
Excellent. And what about the masterclass, Andrea? Did you feel that was a slightly different learning experience?
I don't really know. I felt it was almost a well, I don't know if this is the right answer, but I felt it was a continuum of and a building on of the peer, the learning lab.
Excellent, thank you. Those are really, really helpful responses, and give us a feel for the kinds of responses participants are coming back to us with as part of our evaluation. So thank you, Andrea. Jenny, please could you share my slides again? Thank you. So as we heard from Andrea there, in terms of learning design, our interventions, the peer learning and the masterclasses, and also the coaching, are really helping people to gain new knowledge, but also have the confidence to go into practice and put some of those ideas into place. So these are the kinds of things that people are saying when I'm carrying out interviews with people, coming back in our survey responses, and also things that we're picking up as researchers and facilitators as we're collecting observational data through the process of delivering our interventions. So in the next couple of slides, I just want to just share with you some of the quotes that we've collected so far from our interviews and from our surveys, which give you a feel for the kinds of new knowledge and skills that people are learning as they're going through our process. So the first quote is from a masterclass participant. So I can't quite see the end of the quote because of the, I'll just move the images out the way, there we go. So this masterclass participant, she was talking very positively about her participation in the masterclass, and saying that she'd picked up some new skills in there. So she says, I've picked up some new skills to confidently recruit staff who have the values and skills I'm looking for to join our team, to be compatible with the team and have the right attitude towards the area of work they have applied for. So this particular participant, when I interviewed her, she was talking about how when she was chatting with other people in the masterclass, it really gave her some new skills and confidence, and she went on and actually changed her recruitment practices as a result of being part of that masterclass. And another masterclass participant, again, who has reported this in an interview, the values-based framework is a really helpful guide to helping me facilitate working within the team on identifying our own team values, and I intend on using it with me shaping our team values and thinking, do they fit with the organisational behaviours? So this particular participant had reflected on what she'd learned in that masterclass, and then she had plans on going back into her organisation and having a think about changing some practice as a consequence of being part of our masterclass using the values-based framework. Also coming through in some of our data, our participants talking very positively in the same way that Andrea did about how they've learned through working with other people in our training interventions. So again, this is one of our management pillars, and something that we're really keen to facilitate is this opportunity for people to share ideas with others and learn about values-based recruitment through those peer-to-peer interactions. So this masterclass participant says, I find this really useful. I think within our group we were able to discuss different types of questions and scenarios, and I felt that actually some of my previous questions given an interview had been relevant, i.e. tell us about your journey into this career path. So this participant, it gave her the confidence to believe that what she was doing already in her recruitment practices was actually working quite well. She hadn't heard of the term values-based recruitment, but she was using some values-based questions in her recruitment practices, and actually working with other people in that group helped her to see that what she was doing was good and actually had a terminology associated with it. I feel like I've continued to go further in this area and had some really valid discussions. I really enjoyed the discussions and the topics, and I found a great deal of value in everybody's contribution. So she was talking very positively about working with others in our training interventions. And then another participant, this was a peer learning participant who I interviewed. I learned what others had tried and some of their challenges. And this is a really strong theme coming through our data, is that people really value the opportunity to hear the challenges that other people are experiencing. It helps them to feel that the challenges they're experiencing are similar, and through the opportunity of working with each other, they begin to collectively come up with solutions to those shared challenges. So it's that sense of, I'm not alone with these challenges, other people are experiencing similar issues. My peers made me think about things in a different way too, and I thought this made me more receptive and open to learning. So it's that working with others, giving the participants the opportunity to think through things from a slightly different perspective, thinking through things in a different way. And it's that space, as Andrea's alluded to, that time that people have to think about issues from different angles. In the busy flux of daily practice, that time is just not there. But actually, by sitting together in the peer learning sessions, people have the time, the space to reflect and to think about solutions to some of the challenges that they're facing. So this is some of the data that we're getting back so far. So really positive feedback on our training interventions and how they're helping people to learn about values-based recruitment, learn new practices, learn new processes, and think about things in a different way. Thank you, Jenny. So just in terms, we have another Mentimeter.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Katie, and thanks everybody, and particularly Andrew, who's had a full grilling this afternoon in terms of your experience. So thank you so much. So we just wanted to hand over to the audience, really. There should be another link coming through on the chat if you'd like to follow that, or as before, menti.com, and use the code here 87139456. And this is essentially a word cloud around the key issues for you, or key issues that you found in values-based recruitment in adult social care. So there may be things that have come out of today's session, or maybe things that have happened in your experience. So we'll see if we can wait for some of those to come through. I think it's clear, I think, from Andrew's experience and some of the stuff that Katie's been bringing up as well, and from what Liz was talking about in terms of other quotes that we have from participants, that sometimes it can be a real challenge around this, around kind of non-formal involvement in it. So do we have any? We could ask the team to also put some in. That might get people going a little bit, guys, if that would be all right. We're really interested in finding out what key issues are for people. Okay, so we have developing understanding. I'm guessing that might be of what values-based recruitment actually is, or also obviously of what the values are of the person that you're speaking to, and time to implement as well, which it sounds like that's absolutely been a challenge. We've got lots coming through now, which is fantastic. And compassion and empathy. And I'm wondering, I don't know if anybody has, we're going to go on to some question and answer in a second, but I don't know if anybody would like to mention that, if they're talking about the particular values in values-based recruitment, or whether or not that's something that you think that is important in developing values-based recruitment there. So team, are these things that you expected to see? Are these things that have come up in the interventions?
I think evidence on effectiveness is an interesting one. So there's the Skills for Care survey notes they were a bit surprised that perhaps that didn't come through more strongly. I think in healthcare perhaps there's more evidence, and about a third thought it had helped with retention. But I think building that evidence base will be really important, and hopefully we'll be able to do part of that work.
Absolutely, I think that's a key part of what we're looking at here.
I guess a few on there. Sorry, Jane, I was going to say there's a few on there that resonate with the themes that came out from participants around having knowledge of the process, developing understanding. So really, sort of once people understood this, sort of it's an end-to-end process, for example, it seemed to open more of a door, I think, for people to go, these are the different places and opportunities where I can bring values-based recruitment into this sort of end-to-end process, not just this little bit of the interview. So that all makes sense, and I'd expect to see that.
Absolutely, and obviously equality and diversity being one of the kind of the key foundation stones to looking at values-based recruitment in the first place, I think, as well, developing that in the workplace.
And we do talk about that on the masterclass, actually, because it's quite it can be quite subtle, I think, when you talk about cultural differences, in particular, in how people approach care, for example, from different cultures. And yeah, there's some really fascinating case studies that we've linked to in our resource bank. But it's really important, isn't it? And I think it comes back to the training and making sure that people feel confident and capable of implementing this stuff, and that they don't just feel like they're making it up as they go along. But yeah, absolutely, some really, really interesting themes coming out. And again, they echo what we've seen with the participants.
I think what you were saying earlier about people not necessarily having any formal training in it and being kind of thrown into, I think you could say that about so many different areas of management as well. I think so many people are kind of thrust into the role and then think about training later, and I'm sure it's very much the case here. Great. Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody. I'll just stop sharing and ask if we do have any questions from the audience at all, or any comments from anybody.